And then through John Henry Lewis, and he, found out in my new family that, or well, my family I didn't know about, Tom Molineaux is another ancestor who was a bare knuckle champion.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel Grave Visitations here. So today I'm in Galway here in Galway City, and just outside the city we have this very old graveyard here. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you around and look at some old gravestones that's in here. And we're going to talk about Tom Malanu, the slave from Virginia in the United States of America who ended up here in Galway and fought his way to freedom. So guys, Tom Malanu was an African American slave. He was born on the 23rd of March 1784. So a 200-year-old promise was fulfilled back in this old graveyard in 2019 as the final resting place of a freed slave and champion bare-knuckle boxer. Tom was commemorated here with a new headstone. Tom was born into slavery in the state of Virginia in USA in 1784. He secured his freedom by winning a fight against a fellow slave from a rival plantation. So we have here kind of like a story, and this story kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen the movie Django Unchained, but this is real life and a true story of a great bare knuckle boxer who ended up in the west of Ireland here. So on this cross just here it says, "Pray for the victims of the great famine buried in this graveyard, 1845 to 1847. So we have people buried in here from the great famine also. So as I was saying, we'll read a couple of stones as we go around, and I'll tell you the story about the great Tom Malanu. Here we have the Hare family, 1926, and Honor died in 1945. So there's some really old graves here. This old graveyard, St. James Cemetery. We can see a couple of markers there, they're just stone markers. Now in the cemetery here, and I'll get to that in the story, Tom was buried in an unmarked grave for very, very many years, sadly. But there is a happy ending to this story, I suppose, in a way, and we'll explain that to you as we go around. So Tom Malanu was freed as a slave and given $500. His talents eventually took him across the Atlantic in 1810, where he challenged the English champion Tom Cribb in what was considered the first ever world title fight. So when we hear about world title fights and stuff, people say that this was the real deal, that this was the real title fight, world title fight. So it's amazing to think, that he was brought to the west of Ireland, really, from all the way from the United States, and ended up buried in an unmarked grave here in this old cemetery. And in the old cemetery here is a lot of old graves from the 1800s. So just inside here it says, "This stone has been erected by James Connor to the memory of his mother-in-law, Mrs. Sophia Kennedy, who died the 18th of March 1863, aged 66 years old. So very, very old, this graveyard. Have mercy, O Lord, on the soul of Thady Joyce, who died the 16th of July 1884, aged, it looks like 85 years old, erected by his son Thady Joyce for him and posterity. So there is parts in the old graveyard here, or the cemetery I should say, that they're closed off, you know, and we see a lot of that in the old cemeteries where they close off places because of vandalism, and it is in a very built up area here, as you can see all the houses in the background. So he challenged the English champion Tom Cribb, and it was a controversial loss, which Cribb won the fight. The two rematched in 1811 with the same result. Tom continued to tour Scotland and Ireland, displaying his skills. So Tom Molyneux was a sporting giant, and he was called the Joe Frazier of his day. Tom's achievements saw him inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1997. His great-grandnephew, John Henry Lewis, held the world light heavyweight title from 1935 until 1938. Here we have the Walsh and King families, College Road. This here is the grave of Patrick Fleming, who died the 28th of March 1874, and Catherine Fleming, who died February 1887, and we have a Sarah Fleming, who died in 1909. Huge plot there on this one. So the very, very interesting part about this story and this black American slave who fought for his freedom and is buried here in the old cemetery is that he's actually related to LL Cool J, the US rapper. So US rapper LL Cool J is a relative of Tom Molyneux, and Mike Tyson was inspired by Tom's story so much, who said he was the first black champion who earned his freedom through fighting. However, a fondness for alcohol and also an illness with tuberculosis saw his talents wane, and in 1818 he was discovered sick and destitute on the streets of Galway City. Still only 34 years old, the ailing fighter was given shelter in the Shambles Barracks in Galway City, 77th Regiment here in Galway. So it's a beautiful old graveyard here, and it's not very big, as you can see. Small cemetery here, but full of history. And it's in this old cemetery where the the great Tom Molineaux was laid to rest. So on the 4th of August 1818, Tom Molineaux passed away. The regiment which took him in and gave him shelter buried him and promised to erect a headstone on his grave. That promise never happened at the time. So it's thanks to Brian Peters, boxing manager, and Brendan McGowan of Galway City Museum that Tom has a marker here today. So we'll go, guys, and we'll read the marker of the great Tom Malanu. And Katie Taylor, the world champion boxer Katie Taylor from Wicklow here in Ireland, was here when they erected the headstone as well. There's a great piece of Mike Tyson and LL Cool J on a podcast where the both of them are actually discussing about Tom Molineaux and his greatness and how LL Cool J is related to him. And I'll show you a clip of that.
And then through John Henry Lewis, and he, found out in my new family that, my family I didn't know about, Tom Molineaux is another ancestor who was a bare knuckle champion.
Tom Molineaux, probably in the 1890s it was, against the 1800s.
Seven?
No,
earlier than
1800s, 1790s or something, right?
Yeah.
He was the best slave fighter in America. Nobody in America on the slave plantation could beat him.
Yeah.
And he won his freedom, but you don't understand it. People won their freedom. He won his freedom. His owner gave him $500 in 1700s, late 1700s. Can you imagine $500?
Yeah, and that's why when you look at the history, that's why my mother's side of the family, there's no slavery. There's no history of slavery because Thomas Malanu got us free.
He beat all the slaves. He can't fight slaves no more. He's not a slave no more. Yeah. So he beat all the American free fighters. He beat them all. He's the first slave that could beat everybody in the country. He beat everybody in Australia. He beat everybody. So they come from him to beat the greatest fighter they've known since the beginning of England. His name is Tom Cribb, right?
Yep.
The greatest fighter.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up.
And from that, right, he was so depressed he turned into an alcoholic and stuff.
Yeah, he died. He died in Ireland. He died in Ireland
after having a bunch of kids and stuff.
Very young.
Yeah.
But we'll go now and we'll look at the headstone that was erected here for the great African-American slave Tom Molineaux, the bare-knuckle fighter. And this was the headstone that was erected. And we can see the great Tom Molineaux himself on that. We have the ship here where he came across to Ireland from the United States. We have the map of Ireland and the UK. So here it says Tom Molineaux, 1784 to 1818. African-American freed slave and champion boxer is buried in this graveyard. And just down the bottom of the headstone here we can see the first black champion that got his freedom through fighting. And that was a quote from the great man Mike Tyson himself. So we can see the church on the headstone. We can see the shackles here broken, which means that he was a freed slave. So in this cemetery somewhere here, the great Tom Molineaux is buried, and sadly nobody knows whereabouts he was buried. He was buried in an unmarked grave. So the people from the regiment promised to put a headstone up and they didn't do it. So it's a very sad story, guys. You know, that a man who was admired so much and his greatness fought his way to freedom, ended up here in the west of Ireland. and sadly was buried in an unmarked grave. So it's kind of nice in a way that, you know, they put up that headstone there to remember Tom Molineaux and all he did in the boxing world and the sport. Now there is a couple of graves around here, like, you know, stone markers and stuff. So who knows? One of these stone markers here could be the final resting place of Tom Malanu, the slave from that plantation in Virginia, and he fought other slaves. And there's even a story, I think I was reading as well, that he at one time in his life even fought the owner of the plantation, his son. He fought his son, and apparently there was $100,000 of a bet, which would have been a lot of money back then, on the fight. And the plantation owner's son lost the fight. So maybe it was the plantation owner disgusted that his son lost the fight, lost that big bet, gave Tom his freedom. And Tom had his freedom to travel around the world, Scotland and everywhere. And it is, I always say, you know, it's a very, very small world. We just never know where people will end up. Who would have thought an African American slave in a plantation in Virginia would end up in the west of Ireland here and buried in this cemetery? So rest in peace to Tom Malanu. So what I'm going to do, guys, before I go, we'll have a look at a couple of other little graves and headstones around here and see what we can see. So this is another one inside here, a box tomb. And this is "In your charity, pray for the repose of the soul of Very Reverend James P. Geraghty, parish priest of Castlegar, who died the 30th of August 1864, aged 61 years old." So the gate is actually locked. You can see the padlock there. So what I'm going to do is just try and stick the phone in through here and the gimbal and give you a look. So that tomb, that's actually a tomb there and grave as well. Now there is a find a grave for here, so I'll add that to the video of who's buried in there. Very, very quiet old cemetery here. Nobody around, just myself. I have the place to myself here, walking around, and wanted to come here today to do this video of the great Tom Molineaux. And I don't know if LL Cool J has been to this cemetery in Ireland. That I don't know. But his ancestor is buried here. So Lord have mercy on the soul of Patrick Joyce, who died the 13th of August 1889, aged 67 years, erected by his beloved son James Joyce, same namesake as the great writer James Joyce. Tribute, R.I.P. So there's a couple of houses around, and as I was saying, it's not a big cemetery, but very old. And they have made a lovely path that goes around here, so it's good to see that it's kept nice and clean as well. So here we have, "O Lord, have mercy on the soul of Michael Derrick, who died the 11th of September 1895, aged only 6 years old. Also Thomas, who died 1900, aged 13 years old. And Mary, who died the 4th of November, aged 38. And then we have a Michael down the bottom, aged 43 in 1909. So very young people there, 6 years old in 1895 and 13 years old in 1900. And then we have some graves here that just says the name O'Neill on it. Sad to see that it's just a little cross. No headstones. A lot of markers there as well, stone markers. People who couldn't afford headstones back in the day. So before I go, guys, I'm just going to go down here and read this big cross that's down here. And I think this might tell us a little bit more about people who are buried here from the famine. I'm hoping. So the main video today was here to see that great headstone that was erected for Tom Molineaux, the bare knuckle slave champion boxer. So on this Celtic cross here it says, "This Celtic cross has been erected as a memorial to persons interred in unmarked graves in this cemetery. Several mass graves, including this plot, contain the remains of many men, women and children who perished during the Great Famine from 1845 to 1849. So this plot here is where people were buried from the Great Famine. So they put that cross up to remember them. Very, very sad. The famine. So guys, on that note, I think I'm going to wrap up the video. There's not much to see in here. Just wanted to tell you that story and show you that beautiful headstone for Tom Molineaux. So if you like this video and you like this content, please give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you all on the next adventure. So for me here in the west of Ireland, take care. And I'll see you on the next one.